everyone, welcome to lesson 3 of biology. Today we're looking at vaccinations, another topic that's in the news lots and lots at the moment. We'll look at how they are made, how they work, and then a little bit about why they are so important to us at the moment. We'll start with our questions. First one of which is, how do phagocytes fight against infection? 2. How does skin protect against infection? So both of these from our first couple of biology lessons. 3. Give an example of a pathogen. So we've looked at 4 different types, I think. Pick one of them. Should be one nice obvious example. 4. State the equation for power, thinking back to physics. 5. Which hormone is responsible for reducing blood glucose level? So if you think back to January, this is when we were doing this bit of biology. What would we have all thought back in January if I told you the next time we'd be doing biology it would be in your own home? 6. Why is methane a gas at room temperature? Think of the things we normally talk about when thinking of room temperature. What that really means is boiling point. Room temperature means it's got a low boiling point. Good. So answers then. Phagocytes engulf pathogens. You could say they engulf and digest, but you can't say eat. Skin is a physical barrier. That's all you ever need to be talking about. Your types of pathogens are protists, fungus, bacteria, and virus. Power is work done divided by time. Insulin is the hormone responsible for lowering blood glucose level. And then if something is a gas at room temperature, it must have a low boiling point. That must mean that the forces between the molecules, between your methanes, are weak, and so they are easily broken, easily overcome to break them up so they're a gas. Okay, so vaccinations today then. If we looked last lesson at our first lesson of how we stop the spread of diseases and how diseases try to spread, then we looked at how our body fights infection, fights diseases. Today we're looking at some of the things, and tomorrow, or next lesson, some of the things in which our medicine, which our brain has allowed us to develop and allow us to fight off vaccinations, fight off pathogens better even. Okay, so we need to define vaccines, look at the process of developing a vaccine, and then how we can eradicate diseases using them. Last time I taught this lesson, we had some good laughs about people who are anti-vaccines and how silly it all is. Those people have gone awfully quiet at the moment, as we all are relying on people to develop a vaccine to save us all. So while we're all concerned about coronavirus, we're all a bit scared of it, and it's having this big impact on our life. Human history is littered with humans overcoming other deadly diseases. There's talk of Spanish flu in the news at the moment, which was the last great pandemic that spread through the world. But through much of human history, we have battled with this disease here, which is a little bit more startling, a little bit more obvious as a disease goes than coronavirus. So this child here is suffering from something called smallpox, which you might not have heard of because it's not around much anymore. But it used to be that smallpox killed an awful lot of people. It was just a fact of life that if you got smallpox, there was every chance it would kill you. And it spread through communities, through countries, killing lots of people. So it's estimated that almost 300 million people died of this in the 20th century alone, and it is had a massively high fatality rate. So the fatality rate for the coronavirus is like 1%. This is 33%, which is just astronomically high. It's an incredibly aggressive disease, and even if it didn't kill you, it would leave you with these pox marks for life. So you'd have these scars on your skin where you'd had the pox for the rest of your life. So even survival didn't leave you completely scar-free. And the reason that some of you might not have heard of this disease that killed some of the largest number of people in human history is that we successfully eradicated it. And this is a huge, huge achievement for humans. It's up there with our greatest achievement. It's just that it happened a little while ago, and so we've all forgotten about it. So there was a huge effort on a global scale to eradicate smallpox. We did it using vaccinations. We developed a vaccination and then we rolled it out as a global community to ensure that nobody could get it anymore. And eventually, as people became immune to it, became vaccinated against it, that pathogen, that disease, had nowhere else to go. And as its hosts became inaccessible to it, as there was nowhere for it to live, i.e. people were vaccinated, it started to get smaller and smaller and smaller until eventually, without a host, without somewhere to live, it died altogether. And that's what we're trying to develop at the moment for the coronavirus, is a vaccination to stop people being able to get it, and so it won't be able to survive anymore. Okay. And this eradication program is pretty unheard of. It doesn't happen very often, but it's because of that hugely high fatality rate of 33% that people were interested, or it was important that we eradicated it completely. So we spent lots of money. We put it through every country in order to ensure that it happened. And for a little while after it was eradicated in the wild in 1977, America and Russia during the Cold War kept a few samples of smallpox frozen in some freezers so that they could use it as a biological weapon, because it is very it can live in the air, it can be airborne, and it can pass from person to person very, very quickly. So it is a perfect biological weapon. But in the 1980s, even these samples were destroyed. And so supposedly, at the very least, depending on how you trust those governments, there are absolutely no more smallpox examples in the world. It's completely gone. Okay. So there was a final victim of smallpox, which was someone at Birmingham Medical School. I went to Birmingham University, which is on the same site of this. And this poor young woman, she was a photographer there. She went to take pictures around the medical school. And within a few days after that, she contracted smallpox. She got the symptoms and she died soon afterwards. And no one really knows exactly how she got it. They knew that there were smallpox samples within the medical school at the time, but they don't quite know how she was exposed to it. But in much the same way that we're all isolating to protect our loved ones and our friends and family, when she contracted these symptoms and it became obvious that she had smallpox, there was little they could do for her. They just had to isolate her and ensure that smallpox didn't get back out into the wild. It was incredibly important that it didn't start spreading again. Okay, because all it takes is a few people not to have that vaccination, a few people to get it, and it can build back up very quickly. Okay, so they isolated it and hoped that she was in those 2/3 of people that survived. Unfortunately, she wasn't. And nowadays, none of us, because we are young enough, but if you were to talk to maybe your parents, but more likely your grandparents, they might well have been vaccinated against smallpox, but we don't need to be anymore because it's eradicated. And this little This, as I was saying at the beginning, this idea of being against vaccines or not having your vaccines, it is very silly, because vaccines are protecting you right now. They are protecting all of us, and it is massively important to make sure you have your vaccine. So if you know that you haven't had one or you're missing some, when all this blows over, that should be your number one priority. If nothing else, all of this has shown us is the importance of our health service, of our ability to get vaccinations, free healthcare, and we should all be taking full advantage of that and ignoring these stories about links to autism and things like that. They're just not true, and it's very important that you have your vaccination. So if you don't, make sure you prioritize going to get them. Okay, so this little video here explains how we went about making the smallpox vaccination. Then we'll come back from it, talk about how vaccines work in general, and then we'll pretty much be done.
10,000 years ago, a deadly virus arose in northeastern Africa. The virus spread through the air, attacking the skin cells, bone marrow, spleen, and lymph nodes of its victims. The unlucky infected developed fevers, vomiting, and rashes. 30% of infected people died during the second week of infection. Survivors bore scars and scabs for the rest of their lives. Smallpox had arrived. In 1350 BC, the first smallpox epidemics hit during the Egypt-Hittite War. Egyptian prisoners spread smallpox to the Hittites, which killed their king and devastated his civilization. Insidiously, smallpox made its way around the world via Egyptian merchants, then through the Arab world with the Crusades, and all the way to the Americas with the Spanish and Portuguese conquests. Since then, it has killed billions of people, with an estimated 300 to 500 million people killed in the 20th century alone. But smallpox is not unbeatable. In fact, the fall of smallpox started long before modern medicine. It began all the way back in 1022 AD. According to a small book called The Correct Treatment of Smallpox, a Buddhist nun living in a famous mountain named Ome Shan in the southern province of Sichuan would grind up smallpox scabs and blow the powder into nostrils of healthy people. She did this after noticing that those who managed to survive smallpox never got it again, and her odd treatment worked. The procedure, called variolation, slowly evolved, and by the 1700s, doctors were taking material from sores and putting them into healthy people through 4 or 5 scratches on the arm. This worked pretty well, as inoculated people would not get reinfected, but it wasn't foolproof. Up to 3% of people would still die after being exposed to the pus. It wasn't until English physician Edward Jenner noticed something interesting about dairy maids that we got our modern solution. At age 13, while Jenner was apprenticed to a country surgeon and apothecary in Sodbury, near Bristol, he heard a dairymaid say, "I shall never have smallpox, for I have had cowpox. I shall never have an ugly pockmarked face." Cowpox is a skin disease that resembles smallpox and infects cows. Later on, as a physician, he realized that she was right. Women who got cowpox didn't develop the deadly smallpox. Smallpox and cowpox viruses are from the same family, but when a virus infects an unfamiliar host, in this case cowpox infecting a human, it is less virulent. So Jenner decided to test whether the cowpox virus could be used to protect against smallpox. In May 1796, Jenner found a young dairymaid, Sarah Nelms, who had fresh cowpox lesions on her hand and arm, caught from the udders of a cow named Blossom. Using matter from her pustules, he inoculated James Phipps, the 8-year-old son of his gardener. After a few days of fever and discomfort, the boy seemed to recover. 2 months later, Jenner inoculated the boy again, this time with matter from a fresh smallpox lesion. No disease developed, and Jenner concluded that protection was complete. His plan had worked. Jenner later used the cowpox virus in several other people and challenged them repeatedly with smallpox, proving that they were immune to the disease. With this procedure, Jenner invented the smallpox vaccination. Unlike variolation, which used actual smallpox virus to try to protect people, vaccination used the far less dangerous cowpox virus. The medical establishment, cautious then as now, deliberated at length over his findings before accepting them. But eventually, vaccination was gradually accepted, and variolation became prohibited in England in 1840. After large vaccination campaigns throughout the 19th and 20th centuries, the World Health Organization certified smallpox's eradication in 1979. Jenner is forever remembered as the father of immunology. But let's not forget the dairymaid Sarah Nelms, Blossom the cow, and James Phipps, all heroes in this great adventure of vaccination, who helped eradicate smallpox.
Good, so hopefully you've watched through that. You saw how we developed the vaccine for smallpox, and really all vaccinations work in a relatively similar way. So we can look through that. So they work by stopping us getting diseases, and they do this using the body's natural immune system. So they're not doing anything artificial, it's just using its own defense systems and just forcing them to act a bit quicker. It's important to remember that vaccines stop us getting diseases. They are not something you can take once you've got the disease. So again, really important to have your vaccinations, because it's not like if you get measles, they can give you the vaccine. It's too late. It's a preventative medicine. It's something you have beforehand. Good. So we'll look at how vaccines are made here and administered. So any of you that have had a vaccine, hopefully all of you, will have remembered the process. You go to the doctor, they roll up your sleeve, they stick a needle in your arm. It's a little bit unpleasant. And what they're injecting you with there is a dead or inactive sample of a pathogen. So they take the virus, the bacteria, they kill it, or at least they slow it right down, and they inject that into your body. Okay? And that is just like getting the pathogen normally, except you've got a weaker version of it. And so your body goes into immunal response. You've got your nasty virus here. Drew this myself, very pleased with it. You've got your nasty virus here in your body. It's got these spiky bits, which we call antigens, and your body fights this virus. It comes in to attack it just as it would a normal pathogen. It produces antibodies to lock onto it, to kill it, to defeat it. And this is why when you have a vaccination, it can sometimes make you feel a bit poorly. You're still getting injected with a pathogen, your body's still fighting that pathogen. It's quite common to get headaches or a temperature or things like that, because you're still under attack from a pathogen, but it's a weaker version of it. This is a little like if you wanted to fight someone and wanted to be a boxer, the thing to do wouldn't to go out and start on the toughest opposition you could. You wouldn't go out and find Anthony Joshua and take a swing at him in a car park. You'd find someone much weaker, someone pathetic and defenseless against you, someone like me, beat me up first and then move on to the tougher opposition. Yeah, you start with a weak version and you build yourself up to the stronger one. But because your body has now fought that, it stores these antibodies for a rainy day, and it stores them in your memory cells. So when that virus, that bacteria returns, it knows how to defeat it, and it knows how to combat it. And straight away, you have a nice, quick immunal response. So if you're immune to the, smallpox through the vaccination that we just looked at, when that you're exposed to the real thing, your body immediately knows how to fight it, and it just squashes it and it stops it taking hold. And this is how vaccinations work. Because it is a preventative medicine and it's stopping you getting something, it can take a long time to develop, because you need to make your vaccination, and they've already made vaccinations for the coronavirus. You then need to give it to people, and then you need to expose them to that virus or that illness. And that means really, really robustly testing that, one, the vaccination doesn't have any side effects, but also, two, that it does what you want and it does provide that vaccination and that immunity, because else you will you're enticing people to take an extra risk. If you think you are immune to the coronavirus, if you think you've been vaccinated against it, you wouldn't do any of the social distancing, You wouldn't do any of the washing your hands because you think that you were safe. And so it would be very, very dangerous to tell people that they've had that and not know 100% that it works. So it takes a lot of time, it takes a lot of money, and then even when you get to it's safe, it takes a little bit of effort to roll it out worldwide. Okay, and we've had a couple of vaccinations recently that have shown promise. So the HIV vaccine, when I was at school, your age at GCSE, we were taught as part of our GCSE that we would probably never have a vaccine for HIV because it was far too difficult. But now, a relatively short time later, 12 years, goodness me, that's a long time since I was at school. 12 years later, we pretty much have a vaccine. It just needs to go through some more trials. If you read this here, it is this weird process whereby which they created a vaccine, they gave it to some monkeys, and then they exposed those monkeys to the HIV virus and they didn't get it. So it is still, relatively speaking, in the early stages, okay? Whereas the coronavirus, we have already gone to human testing stages of it. There are people out there right now who have been given this vaccine and then have been exposed to the coronavirus to see whether it works. And the UK, University of Oxford in particular, is leading the race for this vaccine. You are all very, very lucky to live in this wealthy country with an excellent education system, with access to all these amazing things that we lose sight of at times. And so we have got amazing medicine and technologies, and so we're at the front of this. And it could well be that the vaccine that saves the world comes from the United Kingdom, which is at least something to be a little proud of. But it is going to take, even from this point, a little while to get it out to the world, to make sure everyone is safe. It's got to go through lots of stages of testing, which we'll look at more next lesson. And then it would be about making sure that absolutely every person has had the vaccine, or at least the vast majority of people have had the vaccine. The eradication of smallpox took a little over 20 years from first starting to mass produce the vaccine, from having it as a goal to actually getting it to everyone in the world. Now, part of that was because people weren't that interested and there wasn't that much money for it, all of which won't be the case with the coronavirus. But it will take time to go from developing it to making sure it's safe, to making sure that enough people have it to have herd immunity, which is what vaccinations are really for. They prevent epidemics and can eradicate a disease by ensuring that enough of the population is vaccinated and immune to it. So if you think vaccinations, without them, a virus can spread from one person all the way through like this, because it grabs one and passes on to the next, to the next, to the next. The more people that have immunity, the harder it is for that virus to spread through a community, to spread through the world. And so if you took lots of these matches out of the line, the fire wouldn't be able to spread. So if you vaccinate enough people, then that virus cannot spread through it. And it doesn't matter if the odd 1 or 2 people don't have a vaccination. So it doesn't matter that not absolutely everyone is vaccinated against measles and meningitis and those other things, because you're protected by herd immunity, although you should still have your vaccinations. It's about having as many people as possible, so you get, as I say, herd immunity, not that it can no longer spread through a community. And that ultimately can lead to eradication. If enough people have it, there's no one for the virus to live on, no one for that pathogen to live on, and so it can no longer spread through. Okay, good. Finish up then with an exam question, 6-mark question. It says, polio is an illness caused by a virus. In 1988, they started a campaign to get rid of polio. Look at the graph below and it shows the number of cases. 1988 is when the vaccination program started in. Explain how vaccinations work, use the data to conclude if this campaign was successful or not. So this is a classic, nice 6-mark question looking to test and separate top students from middling students to the not so great students, and you're all going to be in that top student category. So the first thing, it says explain how vaccinations work. This is nice easy money. You're just going to remember how a vaccine works and talk a little bit about it. So key thing, they contain dead or inactive versions of a pathogen. This is your definition of a vaccine. This is, if it's a 1 or 2 mark question, this is what you say. But then go on, show that you really understand this, how they work, that these pathogens, when they're placed into the body, they produce an immune response. Your body starts fighting it. And the key things you want to talk about here to get your show off mark, show that you really know what's going on, is to say that antibodies are produced and they lock onto antigens. You're using keywords, 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 really showing that you know your stuff. Okay, what happens when those antibodies are locked onto the antigens? They kill your pathogens. But that's not all. They're stored in memory cells. This is the key bit. You're showing that you've got an immune system to it now. You're immune to it because those antibodies are stored. So this here, these 4 bullet points, these are really nice and effectively explaining how vaccines work. And you'll have shown I'm a top student, I really understand all the keywords, give me lots of marks. And then this last bit, use the data to conclude if the campaign was successful or not. And with these 6-mark questions, it's important to make sure you are remembering the whole question when you answer it. So look at your chart here, and pretty much anything you can say will get you some marks. So generally speaking, the numbers go down. So we can say that it's successful. Number of cases fall after 1988. It might be nice to include some numbers here, say that they go from nearly 35,000 to, I don't know, a couple of hundred. But in truth, there are still some cases, it's not been eradicated completely. And we are, 16 years on from this now, and we don't know what's happened over here on the graph. So without that data, we can't really be sure. But these use the data parts of the question. Just say anything that the graph shows, you'll make sure you get some marks. And if you're not happy with this tough bit in the middle, tell me what a vaccine is, tell me that it produces an immune response, and then use the graph. Absolutely everyone is able to get some marks from explaining a graph. So if that's all you can do, that's all you will write down and get a couple of marks for that. This exact question is in your assessment. All go do that now. Have a grand day. Bye-bye.